Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Public Safety and Health Committee meeting for December 3rd, 2025. It's 4 p.m. Let's call the roll. I'm Chair. I'm here. Vice Chair, Councilmember Larson.
Here.
Councilmember Cobb.
Here.
We have Councilmember Sheets in attendance. We have Chief Britton in attendance. We will introduce others as we move through our agenda. The first item is the deer population survey that ODNR has been so generous to provide for us. We have Jeff Westerfield on Zoom, and I think we'd like to start the conversation, just kind of get an update of how the survey is going, the number of counts. Do we have enough data? Just kind of get a sense of what we have going on with the survey right now.
Yeah, so, you guys had actually quite a few responses. Actually, you're winning the race at this point, believe it or not. If that's a good thing, I don't know. But I guess it's good from the standpoint we're getting some responses from the residents, right? So the survey is designed behind the idea of if you have a problem, we want to hear about it and to know what those problems are. So right now on that survey tool, I think we're sitting right around 2,200 or so responses across mostly Northeast Ohio and the cities that have utilized it and sent out to the residents. Of that 2,200, over 800 of those are from Cleveland Heights. So that's a lot, and a very high percentage of the people that have responded. So I actually took some time to kind of go through. There was eight communities that have a pretty robust data set of residents that have filled that out in their communities. When we take a look at those 8 communities, Cleveland Heights with over 800 responses, I kind of broke it out on the number of responses per square mile of the community, just to kind of give you a layering of what the situation is and the number of responses. So you guys were at 103 responses per square mile in Cleveland Heights. The next closest was Bay Village at 32 per square mile. And then, it drops down from there. So, 3 times the next closest community as far as the number of residents that responded with their concerns with deer. And I think, in talking to Jim, I think, he felt like you guys didn't even push it out that hard as far as communication to the residents. But clearly, the residents said that they had some issues. Interestingly enough, one of the nice things about this new survey tool is we can take a look at it from a spatial standpoint of where those issues are in town. And in the, especially the southern, let's say half of Cleveland Heights, definitely had, a very heavy presence of responses from that area. When we get up closer to the South Euclid line, you actually see a little less number of responses up in that area, which makes sense. With South Euclid doing a deer management program and having that deer population under some pretty good management at this point, it makes sense that there is not as many issues up in that portion of the city as there is in the other parts of Cleveland Heights. So from that standpoint, I think it also did a good job of kind of painting a picture of where those issues are in town. I can go, answer any questions, or we can, go deeper into that if you want. But that was kind of the in and out of the survey for you guys.
Well, the first question is, the survey's been up for close to 60 days, I believe, I'm guessing. Do you think we have a representative enough responses, or do you think we should request our communications department to try to gather any more?
Well, so I think, we think about when the issues arise, in most situations in the community. And in most of those situations, they arise in the summertime and then in the breeding season. which is going to be in that late October into early November. So I think you guys hit that time of the year when in the fall there when is the second time when deer are causing issues. So I would say right now I don't know that you're going to gain, if you, let's say we do a mass, social media campaign to try to get more responses. Are we going to gain any more at this point? I don't think it's going to point us any more direction other than, yes, there is the residents say that there are a lot of deer issues in town. What I do think there would be value in is kind of resurfacing this in the, middle spring, late spring, early summer, and that time when we see a lot of residents experiencing issues with deer in their yards on landscaping and gardens and that kind of thing, to kind of do it again. Hey, if you have problems with deer, again, we want to hear about them, right? So we do put in the survey. So keep in mind on the survey, resident, you can only submit 2 responses per address per calendar, per 12 months. So, they're not going to be able to kind of resubmit again if we send it out right now anyways. And then the other thing too is that, where's my mind going on that?
Well, we do have a lot of passionate people in this community that are going one way or the other, as in we have, people that are telling us we have a deer problem. I mean, this is anecdotally getting emails from members of the public. So I think what you're referring to is stuff in the ballot box. I mean, you can't do that with this.
Correct. Yeah, and I guess in saying that if we push it out again in the spring or summer, right? Some of these people that responded in the last 60 days, will not have that ability to respond again. So, but again, it'd be an opportunity just to say, hey, if there are issues out there, to the folks that didn't respond, to continue getting some sort of responses. And then the survey is open 365 days a year. So at any point in time, you guys want to push out, the information on, hey, we want to hear if you have, problems, let us know. You can certainly do that, but, because it's always open, there's no closed period on it.
So maybe what we do, just out of the abundance of caution, move forward with what we've got, because I think what you're telling us is we've got a good sample size. And then the other piece to it is, remind people if you by chance didn't fill it in and you think you need to make your voice heard, fill it out. And we can keep that open and just, as we get data, I mean, we won't lock in these results as the way that they are, but we'll continually get input and feedback from our citizens. Yes.
2 questions for you, Jeff. For one thing, thank you for supporting us on this endeavor to collect data. It's very important. When we talk about the demographics, when we get the results, will we see a map that reflects where responses came from throughout the city?
Yeah. I actually kind of pieced together a small little 1-page summary. I can send that over to Jim or whoever, and you guys can take a look at that as well.
Okay, that's great. And then the other thing is the results. We'll be able to see the breakdown and how people responded to questions, the different questions on the survey. Yeah. So what I'll send over is a summary. If you want to see the raw data, so the individual every response that was turned in, I can provide that to you. Just let me know. But the summary should get you down pretty far. I mean, I don't know that you're going to gain a lot by drumming down through each of the responses. I think the summary will get you where you need to be. Yeah, I was just talking for questions, per question on the survey, the numbers that responded to the various elements within the question. So, yeah. So we'll get a reflection of how they view their particular area in their neighborhood. Yeah, you'll get what their issue, what the problem, what the deer issue was that they were experiencing on the property. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Mm-hmm.
So the preliminary results you shared with us, maybe about a month ago, I mean, it was pretty decisive is not the word I'm looking for. I mean, the conclusion was we have a deer management problem, and it's not like a 60-40 kind of thing. It's more like 90+% of 800 some people that took this survey feel like we've got an issue that we need to solve, and a very small minority, well, maybe 5% like the population the way it is. A few people say that they're not sure, and a very small people say they would like to see the deer population increase. I mean, like probably less than 1%.
Keep in mind, I mean, obviously, and I call this, if we're going to call a survey a little bit of a bias survey, right? Because we're not surveying do you like the deer, what do you love about the deer. We're surveying if you have issues and what those issues are. So we are getting, a little bit of a lopsided response as far as the decrease go. But what what the hope is that as that number of deer, as the fewer issues there are in town, you should see a decrease in the number of people saying, yes, but I want to see fewer deer in town, right? So I kind of looked at Mentor, which has a decent number of responses, but is a program that has been managing deer for a long time. And has that program kind of in a good spot, right? With as far as the number of deer in town, they're kind of at a maintenance level. Whereas when they started, I mean, those deer numbers were probably somewhat in the realm of Cleveland Heights at a very high number. And so when we look at that Mentor data, we see that green bar for the number of, the respondents that said, hey, yeah, I have a problem with deer, but, I think we have about the right number of deer. We see a little higher percentage of that, which makes sense, from the standpoint that, yes, I have a problem with deer, but I don't necessarily think, we necessarily, need to decrease the number. So that percentage should go up a little bit. And so that played out really well when we looked at a situation like Mentor versus what the respondents were for Cleveland Heights.
Okay. What do you think our next steps are?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's a couple different things that, you probably need to take a look at. One is, if is taking a look at the numbers, right? So we can focus on the non-lethal side. So that's the secondary thing is we can do some educational stuff in town if that's what you guys would like to do. I am more than happy, if we want to set up a time in the late spring, would be a great time to do a workshop in town for any residents that want to show up. We can certainly talk about things that they can do on their gardens, on their landscaping to try to keep deer off of that and to protect some of those issues. That does nothing from a number standpoint. So obviously the more deer we have, the more issues there are. That's a no-brainer. So the next thing is to look at a number thing. What do you guys want to do something to try to reduce the number of deer in town? And if so, then the conversation would go around, how do we do that? And there's several different options that you can take a look at doing that. Whether it be some type of hunting program, which I usually suggest, and in a city like Cleveland Heights, that alone is not going to do is not going to fix the problem, but can help along the way. And then looking then secondarily at like a sharpshooting program where, you would be doing some larger targeted deer removal in town to get those numbers down much quicker. Obviously the hunting of it is we can do for pretty cheap, next to nothing. Doesn't cost the city anything, but a little bit of manpower to do some site visits and make sure that the places where the hunters want to hunt can be done safely. The sharpshooting side of it comes at an expense. So that ultimately comes down to where you guys are at from a budgetary standpoint, what you can put at that, and then there's certainly several options that you have and how you would accomplish doing that work that comes with different financial obligations and time obligations if you're going to use some city staff. So we can certainly have those conversations as well. Ultimately, it's just where you guys think things are at, and do you want to get the non-lethal stuff is easy peasy, right? We can do those workshops, but do you guys want to take that step and do some lethal management to get those numbers down in town?
So I think for us, I think that's a no-brainer. I'd like to just sort of get everybody's opinion. So just non-lethal, we do training. There is, sitting on some table someplace, your legislation, Gail, which is for, do not feed the deer kind of issue, and it was modeled after best practices and other local suburbs that have implemented that.
It's ready to go when we're ready.
Okay.
I would like to get some updated data on deer vehicle crash, because I think the last time we had a full year's worth was 23. Can we get some for 24?
Just so happens the police chief is here regarding our next agenda item.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can get that for you first thing tomorrow.
Oh, that's fine. You have other things on your plate, but when you get a chance. And the carcass removal, I don't know if that comes out of our Director Clinkscale's department.
Did we just
believe
do
it does.
something not too long ago?
I did 24.
No.
we have 24.
Okay, well, if you could resend it to me, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Thank you. The carcass removal will come out of Director Clinkscale's office.
Okay, so let's get that data.
Yeah. Because that's one thing Jeff taught us in his seminar was we want to be data driven on any decisions we're making, and I want to stay with that philosophy.
Councilmember Cobb.
Question, I seem to recall an aerial survey being required or necessary. And do we need a permit from the state of Ohio to go forward?
There's no requirement for an aerial survey or a deer survey to be done. However, it can be very helpful if we're doing the legal side of it, because then that helps guide us towards understanding what the numbers are at and making sure that the number that you are shooting is pointing in the right direction, that we're getting a reduction in the deer, moving forward. So a survey, it can be helpful, not required. And there's several different ways you can do surveys. So, you can do an aerial survey by plane that does infrared. There are a company or two out there that does that. They're not cheap, but that is an option that exists. You can do a helicopter survey where you basically have observers in a helicopter. You're running lines across the city and just counting deer. You typically got to have good now because we've got snow, so you got to have snow on the ground to be able to see the deer very well. But that is a survey that you can do that is cheaper. But you do either got to contract that. You got to contract at some level unless somebody there has a helicopter that you can utilize. The other option is, in a lot of cities do this, is that they will contract with Wildlife Services to do a deer survey. They do a driving survey where they use thermal cameras to count deer as they're going up and down the roads, and then they have a very good protocol for that to be able to have an idea of how many deer are in town. That's much cheaper to do, so that's why a lot of cities go with that route. And then there are some other options. So, I don't know if the police department has a drone, but that's a technique that you can use, to fly and count deer that way. Similar to the helicopter, having the snow is very helpful in doing that. Although a lot of those drones also do have thermal as well. And so that's another option, obviously, if you have that drone and want to utilize that. If you don't, there are companies you can hire to do that as well. There are other companies that you can hire to do surveys as well, similar to like Wildlife Services on those deer counts. So that there are lots of options for getting those surveys done and to have an idea of the number of deer that are in town. It's not required, but can be very useful when we are making decisions on how many deer to permit for a particular year.
What time of year do those typical, can you give us a rough idea for our calendar wise when we do those kinds of surveys, when deer management culling would take place? If there was there's been no mention of sterilization, which I believe is one of our neighboring cities, does that. Can you just give us a rough idea of, timeframes? I mean, we talked about this in our public forum, but I just think just for the public's understanding, it would be, I think, helpful for them to hear it again.
Absolutely. So the surveys are almost always run once leaves are off. So obviously like now would be a good time. But typically they're waiting until that late October, early November to do those surveys at the earliest. Typically you can run those surveys all the way through March, until we start getting the warm spell and leaves start coming back on. So that's kind of your window on those surveys. Obviously with like a drone or a helicopter or a plane, having leaves on, creates a problem for being able to see the deer. So that's that window there. From a culling window standpoint, it gets stretched out a little bit. So some programs will start into September or early October. So you can sometimes start a little bit early on the culling side of it. And typically those are done usually no later than the end of March. On the permits I write for those, I have a standard. I just write March 31st on there. We've never had programs ask for any extensions beyond that. So usually that's the window of time there. Most operations occur from December 1 through the end of February. That's kind of the sweet spot, if you want to call it that, for when most of those operations occur. Regarding sterilization, so we have starting last year, we kind of started moving into a mode where we are allowing sterilization to be a complementary aspect to deer management with sharpshooting as well. So if a program is doing sharpshooting and wants to utilize sterilization, they can. There's a lot more logistics that go into that aspect of it, and sterilization will come at a higher cost than the shooting part will. So again, from a financial standpoint, you just kind of got to figure out where you want to lay the dollars. So for instance, like this, so last year was South Euclid that had been doing sterilization for several years. Last year was the first year we kind of folded into the management side of it rather than a research. We still are looking at it from a research lens, from the standpoint that we're looking at how the combination of sterilization and shooting dictates those numbers going into the next year and what management needs are there for the following management season. So we are allowing that, and then this year Beechwood and Shaker Heights are also adding in sterilization with their sharpshooting programs. The best way to kind of view the sterilization aspect is this, right? So we have hunting that we can utilize at some level, right? There are definitely places in Cleveland Heights where hunting could be done. Whether it is or not is another story, right? Whether that landowner would want to allow it or not, whether through an assessment, whether it a particular application that would come in could be done safely is certainly decision that affect whether it gets utilized or not. But that's kind of layer one, right? Layer two is sharpshooting. So now when we do targeted deer removals and sharpshooting, it's a lot more controlled. We've got individuals that are using rifles, so we have a little more extension. Those deer are dropping in their tracks. They're not taking another step after they're shot. We can do that in a lot tighter quarters. So in the areas where the hunting isn't able to be utilized, we can utilize that sharpshooting in much more tighter quarters. So even in residential areas, if we have a wood lot behind several homes, easy spot where that sharpshooting can be utilized. But again, we are still limited by having access. So for instance, like in Brooklyn, who's looking to start a sharpshooting program this year, and we're looking at where we can utilize that. The Old Plain Dealer site, which is a huge piece of property, lots of open ground there. You can't just go where we want, right? So the city had to ask for permission to utilize that property, and Plain Dealer said no. So at this point, they opted out to being allowing that. So we utilize sharpshooting and have a lot more abilities to get into some tighter areas where hunting can't, but it's not every spot that we can. So that's where the sterilization then comes into like that next final layer, is that where we can't get into those areas with sharpshooting is where we put the focus on that sterilization. So you guys are probably familiar with South Euclid being a sister city and driving through it probably regularly. The whole kind of concept there when we look at it from a management standpoint is that south of Mayfield Road is the area that is more dense areas. They don't have a lot of sharpshooting of sites down in that area. So we focus the efforts of the sterilization down there versus the sharpshooting, even though both are being utilized down there. Just the sterilization gives us more access. So with the sterilization, how we kind of operate that is that it's the cities provide an opt-out instead of an opt-in program for the residents. So as long as the properties haven't opted out, the people doing the sterilization and the darting of those deer to be able to get those deer to do the sterilization have more access than points than what the sharpshooting does. So we kind of use that as kind of that last layer to get into some of those even tighter areas where sharpshooting can't get at the deer.
So we have a question from Councilmember Larson.
Would you please provide us, Jeff, with the list of those different options we have for a deer survey so we can look at, and if you know what the costs, approximate costs are, that would be helpful. Then the committee can work on gathering some information before our next meeting. And second, when we're talking about sharpshooting, I want to make sure that people understand we're talking about donating the meat.
I think that's pretty much the best practice.
Yes.
That's what we have found.
Yes.
So again, it all comes down to finances, right? So, I don't force anybody to do any particular, go one way or the other with the deer that are shot. Historically, most programs did a situation where they would contract with a butcher. Those deer would go to the butcher, they would get processed, and then that meat would go to a food bank. Up your way, most oftentimes Cleveland Food Bank. There are not a lot of deer processors out there. The numbers continue to dwindle down on the number of processors that are available. And because some of these programs operate outside the normal hunting season when these processors are doing deer, there's a limitation to the processing side of it. And it comes at a financial cost to the city as well, right? So you're paying for that processing. So what we have actually been moving and utilizing a lot in newer city programs is doing call-out lists. So it's very similar to how a sheriff's department or some police departments will do it if they have a deer that gets hit on the roadway. They will have a call-out list and they'll call down that list of the people that are on there and say, hey, would you like a deer? And so we, in fact, I was just dealing with a situation Monday with Parma Heights who has a program. A guy happened to show up at a processor I was at, a deer processor I was at, and had a deer from that program. So in those call-out lists, basically the city maintains a list of people that are interested in receiving a deer. Once that deer is shot, that person shows up at a date and time, or not a date, but a time and location, and they just simply transfer that deer over to that person. So there's no processing cost for the city. It takes that financial burden off of the city, and it provides an outlet for that deer to get utilized. It's just the same as it would if it were being donated. And so we have found with the programs that are using those call-out lists, a very successful way to cut costs and keep that meat local. So some cities will do call-out lists only for the residents of that community. Some will say, we don't care, if you're willing to come here to get this deer, we're more than happy to put it in your hands. And so those have proven to be very, very successful programs for these call-out lists.
Jeff, I've got two other questions for you, and we are running a little bit short of time here. The first one is, in your expert opinion, can you give us a range of how many deer we have? It's okay if it's a huge number difference. I mean, 10 to 1,000, 100 to 200, 500 to 1,000. Would you have some gut feeling of what that number would be like?
I figured you were going to ask that question. So I spent a considerable amount of time today taking a look at your data, comparing it to some other communities, and trying to piece that together what I think, is maybe out there. Honestly, the deer survey is going to point us in a much better direction. If you guys can get those service department pickups, that will also help point it, and fine tune and get us a little closer. But I would guess, putting a number out there, can't hold me to the number. But I would say you're somewhere between 450 and 850 deer. And I know that's a big range, so you told me I could give you a big range. I think you're somewhere in that ballpark. And probably more on the getting in the higher part of that than the lower part.
So with that in mind, and knowing the statistic, which is the deer populations increase on average about 30% a year. Okay, so I just can't, I mean, I did my math with 1,000, so it's a nice round number.
Mm-hmm.
Year one, you start off with 1,000. In year 3, you end up with 2,197. So almost every 3 years, it's doubling. It's more than doubling. Approximately. Again, you know, that it compounds. It's like compound interest. I mean, the reason I'm bringing that up is we're getting right up to the window of winter, which is when deer calling programs happen. We don't even know if we're going to do deer calling. So I just say that we're still looking at all the information, but it seems to me every year you wait, you're going to end up killing more deer the following year. I mean, just in order to get your numbers down, it almost seems humane to try to solve the problem quicker, because in the end, you're not killing as much just because of this compounding of how the populations increase. I know I'm jumping the gun here, and there's a lot more things to tease out of this, and probably some more feedback we want to get from our community. But I kind of ask everybody here, I mean, is this something you think we can, I mean, is your gut feeling we should be looking at trying to do something in late winter, which sort of changes our timeline a lot? Or is this something that can wait another year? So I'm just throwing that out with everybody, just getting a sense. Councilmember Cobb?
We've been talking about a deer problem ever since I went on city council in 2019. It has only gotten worse, and it gets worse every year. We cannot continue to keep kicking this can down the road. We have to accept that we are going to upset residents with any deer calling, but if it is necessary. If anyone sat through the presentation that they gave last, was it spring? There can be no question that we have to do something. We just cannot sit by and do nothing. So I am in favor of it. I have not had a conversation with the new mayor to find out what his view is on this, since we're going to need his sign off to do anything. But I'm prepared to make a motion tonight to go forward with a survey and to start looking at the costs of culling and sterilization. I think hunting is going to be a bridge too far in this city.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll just have to incur the extra cost with some sharpshooting, but the hunting is.
Councilmember Larson?
I would agree with everything that Councilor Cobb said. It's time we get started. I also, if we have to, we ramp up an education campaign, as we're talking about the option of possibly doing some sharpshooting. But I would like to see the survey done for certain, and then, whatever we can do, if there's anything we can do this spring or whenever to begin the process. But I do believe we have to speak to Mayor-elect Petrus.
I agree.
And soon.
Councilor Sheets?
I agree also. I don't experience, or I haven't seen like a bad deer problem. However, looking at the maps and listening to the residents, I definitely can respect the sentiments that something needs to happen. But as was stated, the longer we wait, the more they have babies, the more we're going to wind up kind of definitely behind the gun. So
I'm totally in agreement with what everybody has said here. And in the interest of time, what I'm going to suggest is, because this is a bigger issue, I think we need to engage all council members. We need to talk to the mayor-elect. and just sort of get a sense of where he feels, and possibly have a public forum. But why don't we try to have just a few minutes on our calendar
12:15.
and one of our next council members or one of our next council meetings, just to get a sense of where we're at.
Okay.
We really need to jump to our next item because we've got a finance committee meeting at 5. But Jeff, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I recall when you came here and you spoke with the Metro Parks, that was just an awesome presentation. And I think we need to make sure our community sees that, at least that first, 45 minutes of really why we are in this state of why we've gotten ourselves as a city, just not Cleveland Heights, all cities in northeastern Ohio. I mean, deer were almost extinct, as you pointed out, and now their population is growing kind of unchecked. And we do have one community member who I always think about, who presented to us. It's like, you're already killing deer. You're already killing deer because they're getting hit by cars. So, which is not humane. So what can we do just to get those numbers down? So.
Yeah, and you guys are getting at a spot where if you're gonna do something this year, we're starting to get late in the decision-making point, to be able to get something implemented this year. Depends on how you would wanna go about it. I will send you over some of the options to kind of help frame that for you guys and make that decision, and then that'll help point, where you're at as far as, can we get something done this year, or is this something we're going to just be looking at to next winter kind of situation? So it'll give you some ways to make that decision.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now.
I got just one 30-second statement.
Yes.
There's a teacher from Hawken that reached out to me. Her name is Claudia Taus, and she's interested in possibly having her students involved in the data processing that we're looking at in terms of policy making. So she's watching this afternoon, or we'll get a chance to watch our presentation, and I'll give you more information on that if you're interested in pursuing this.
Let's do that. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, I reached out to the administration to see. So we have a finance committee meeting coming up. There is, one of the hot items for this committee, and I think other council members. Thank you, Director Zanf. Ken, for being here with us. But I reached out to the administration to help us get a little bit better understanding of where we stand with the budget for 2026 and how much monies are allocated in that budget for essentially traffic safety and calming. And we received some results. We've talked to planning, police, public works. Sad to see nobody from Public Works here. But I appreciate some of the responses that I received from them via email. But why don't we start off to try to get a sense of where we are with some of these initials. I know there's probably more information that planning has to share. I'd like to start with police. I know you've got some active police work going as we speak, and you're generous spending your time with us while your people are fixing those issues. But I think what we're looking for is, is there anything that you're able to share with us that's in your budget that is directly related to, traffic calming and safety? Now, I'm going to preface this, don't mean to put you on the spot. It might be an issue of, I need to get back with you. That kind of answer is certainly acceptable to me, and I think everybody else.
Well, I mean, I know it sounds like a broken record to everybody, but my biggest challenge in terms of traffic safety enforcement and deterrence is, personnel. So that's our primary budgetary item, having the available budget to hire officers. you know, coming up through the ranks to where I'm at now, there's no doubt that high visibility and targeted enforcement to areas with increased traffic and so forth is a deterrence and helps out. But I think like at the last meeting, even I'm sitting here now, you know, it's still a challenge to get us back up to a full staff where we once enjoyed the more targeted enforcement to traffic areas and in the business districts and so forth to do that.
And just to remind everybody, this is not necessarily a Cleveland Heights problem. This is a problem all over the United States where.
Correct, absolutely. I talk to our community, surrounding community chiefs all the time, and we're all in the same predicament.
You're down about 10%, 15%, maybe a little bit better now.
We just have 6 coming out. We've actually added a couple more. I think we're a total of 7 now, Sean, I think.
Yes.
6 from the academy and 1 lateral, but they're now just starting. They're in orientation this week. And so between orientation, which takes a couple weeks, and getting with the training officer, that's in another, they won't be ready for full service duty to be on themselves for 5 to 6 months. It's a very, it's a lengthy program, but a lot of phases to go through. And, you know, we want to ensure that our officers are well trained and prepared for the duties ahead of them. But we still have, I believe we still have 6 openings right now. We just had a detective, he retires at the end of this month, and maybe another officer leaving. So it's been a constant. But I assure you, I have Sergeant Jackman. He's been my recruitment officer, and that's all he does is recruitment, the background checks and investigations to ensure we get the best qualified candidates that we think can serve the city.
So from a physical purchase things, I mean, things we can purchase. I mean, council has always talked about traffic tables, which isn't necessarily the only thing out there. It's probably one of the smallest things out there. But I mean, things like purchasing additional things that go on street poles to tell people how fast they're going and, you know, please slow down. I mean, are there things that we can do to add to our budget that you folks think, and kind of I'm morphing planning into this conversation because most of this stuff starts in the planning department. It sort of gets deployed with public works, and oftentimes that's utilized with police work on the back end. So it's a continuum, I believe, of how our departments function together and how they work at solving the problem. I know there's a lot of work that planning has done, you know, on this. So we might need to just sort of jump right to you folks to kind of get a sense of what's on the horizon. What can we fund more? What have you already asked us to fund?
Yeah, so it's a good segue to make that jump. And the past couple of years, we've really spent a lot of time on the planning side of this, whether it was the CSAP, which is the Comprehensive and Equitable Safety Action Plan, through the federal funding or active transportation plan with our sister cities, which was state funding. And those were both adopted end of last year, early this year. And we spent this year taking those recommendations and trying to implement them. And part of that implementation is, you know, doing actual stuff, but a lot of it is doing now the design work that came out of the recommendations. The good news is that because we've spent a lot of this year doing that, we've set ourselves up for a lot of these implementation funds. Mm-hmm. And so in the email that I sent to the chair, just for everyone's sake to understand, in our capital budget this year, we had $200,000 set aside to match. It was our required local match for the federal SS4A demonstration project.
This is Safe Streets for All.
Safe Streets for All. So that overall project was $1,800,000 awarded by the federal government, 20% match of ours, and that 20% match was and is going to go towards traffic calming, things like traffic tables, and I'll let Ken give you some specifics about it. Just so everyone understands, if you paid attention at all this year, there was a lot of attention by the administration in Washington to curb a lot of that. The good news is that we're still moving along, albeit very slowly, with them. And we think we're pretty close. I don't want to jinx it, but we think we're pretty close to actually finally having an agreement with them. A lot of our sister cities throughout the country have not even made it to that stage. So
The 200, I'm sorry, Director, the 200,000 is in the 2025 budget, or is that what you built into 2026?
So it's in the 2025 budget, and we have requested to encumber those
Thank you.
funds to carry over.
Thank you for, don't let them forget
Yes.
this.
And then for the 2026 budget, so we did apply for the implementation funds for SS4A, which is a total of $5.3 million, because that's a huge pot of money, and our local match is 1.5 million. So there's a lot of opportunities there for traffic calming, including South Taylor Fairmont intersection, and getting the recommendations that we have there done. And again, Ken can sort of give you the details, but probably a lot of the things that you guys are thinking about funding can be covered by all of that. Even the traffic speed, what are they called? What's their technical term?
Yeah.
Speed signs.
Yeah, we have some of those.
Yeah. So if we need to get more of them, that would even be eligible to be utilized at that funding. But Ken, do you want to just paint a little bit of a picture of what
Yeah.
some of the things are?
Yeah, so if we're looking at the demonstration project, which we were hoping to have out on the road this year, but of course with the federal government, that has slowed down. And part of that was kind of new priorities that came out of the new administration. So that made FHWA kind of revisit everybody's awarded grants. And so that happened with us too. So we had to remove some temporary road diets. That was one thing that was suggested. So we had to strip that out, which is kind of a bummer, but that does allow us to probably achieve and accomplish everything else on the list, because that was a pretty big part of the budget. So that'd be looking at some mid-block crossing improvements and helping to daylight those crossings through a lot of paint and plastic, just making it so cars can't be near where people are crossing, which is very helpful. It'll look at signal timing at a number of intersections, which I know people are passing along the map now. In particular, looking at leading pedestrian interval, which works out really, really well for folks like me that walk a ton, and just making those crossings a lot safer. And then has a number of other streets that are marked as kind of any other traffic calming that we may come up with. And that can be we want to treat those with a variety of options to kind of test and see what works out. Again, these are demonstration activities. They're not necessarily going to permanently be out there, but it gives us a chance to try things like chicanes that hasn't been done here and see how the residents like them, how that's working. It could be things like speed tables. It can be things like this radar signs that can be picked up and moved from location to location. So there are a number of different things that aren't necessarily specified which treatment. Each of those have to be looked at individually to determine what treatment is the best, but it gives us a lot of different options then to spread out those designs throughout the city.
I'm sorry, Ken. When you look at, let's just say the Coventry intersection where you're coming off of Coventry and turning right on Lee, people pull into that pedestrian crosswalk and you can't cross the street. Is that evaluated during this process that you're going through?
Yeah, that is one of them that is marked here. We may be looking at a bigger treatment for that through another grant.
Okay.
So that's a particularly dangerous crossing that probably deserves even more attention than just can be done through the demonstration. But if we can get something out there through the demonstration, which would be a lot faster than through other programs,
Thank you.
it's something we do want to address.
So just so everybody knows from the map that we're looking at, there's high concentrations of work on Cedar and Lee and Taylor and Mayfield and Noble, Monticello. There's some other, I would suspect probably unique stuff that you're working on. It looks like you're looking at streets like Maple and North Taylor, and then, you know, higher up in the Oxford area. So these, just to get a sense on the map, is this map holistic of the entire Safe Streets for All, or is this just, as the title of this graphic indicates, this is just work that you're focusing on the demonstration?
All of these locations came out of the CSAP study.
Okay.
So we looked at trying to prioritize which demonstration activities made the most sense, kind of the most bang for the buck, and then try to treat some of those high interest, dangerous areas, those high incident corridors. And this will really address some of those in a much quicker way than it would, get new, multi-million-dollar projects out on the ground, which can take. And we're seeing through like the Taylor Road TLCI that just working through other agencies, it takes years to get on the ground.
So just to clarify, the CSAP study has more recommendations than just this, but these are the ones that were eligible or fit into the demonstration project. So, and those are the ones that we'd be focusing on first.
So it's getting the funds for the demonstration grant, you're what, 95% there?
I think
Probably further than that.
they even said higher than that to us.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then-
we've signed the grant agreement and returned it, and FHWA is reviewing it.
I see. And their big issues are things like they really don't want to fund things like cyclist or
Well, it
To a
was
certain
even
extent.
much further than that. So essentially anything that decreased the capacity of the roadway for automobiles, i.e. road diet. So we had to remove that from our application.
I see.
Yes.
So this is the demonstration side of it. So the full bore deployment, where do you think we are chance-wise to get that? And when would those monies flow into the city? If
So as
that-
part of the same conversation, what they said to us, granted it was not an official, was that they were looking to award those monies in December. And here we are, we haven't heard anything. Because that funding does expire, meaning the appropriations of it on the federal level expires next year. So this was really the last round. There is some bipartisan support to extend it, but who knows if they're going to do that. So it seems like it's moving forward, and we're really hopeful because we've been successful. We've been following exactly what they've asked of us, which is do the planning, then do the demonstration, and then come in for the implementation stuff. And since we've been careful to craft it so that it meets what the current administration is looking for, we feel confident or comfortable about it.
Do you believe you need to have the demonstration work complete?
No, we didn't condition one on the other.
They're separate projects as well, looking at different areas. So one shouldn't influence the other.
So when you said, I think the 1.4, 1.7 million and the 5, is this, a total of close to 7 million? Is that really what it is?
So 5.3 is the implementation project, 100, that 1 million is I'm getting around. 5.3 is the implementation project, 1 million is the demonstration project, so we're at 6.3.
6.8.
Just in this federal funding, but we've also been clawing our way to every other opportunity out there and have been, I think, making some headway on that. So we're hopeful that other ODOT funding, the lack of funding, there's going to be this smaller grant, Road to Zero, that we're going to be applying for in January, which will help do some of these smaller projects. We're just trying to scrape together as much as we possibly can so that it doesn't have to fall fully upon the general, the capital.
It's encouraging to hear you say that what you have coming in for these grants and what we have already budgeted in 2025 will take you through 2026 so that council should not need to request any additional funding. You've got the projects lined up, or you know what's gonna happen, you know what the capacity is gonna be, and implementing them will be key. So additional money would,
Yeah, we don't think we need it right now, cause we should hopefully have plenty of it.
Thank you.
We need to spend,
Yeah.
and to the chief's point, obviously on the enforcement end, which is a key part of this continuum,
Yeah.
having the people there, it's having the capacity is the key block, right?
Any other questions?
Just wanted to quickly point out, if I may, Chief, that next legislation coming from us is gonna be the acceptance of a grant that we accepted, the Ohio Department of Public Safety, the Selective Enforcement Program, and also the Impaired Driving Enforcement Program. We were awarded close to $67,000, which is gonna allow us for 750 hours, man hours of proactive patrolling, where they're only gonna be doing speed and distracted driving and all those different types of things that are gonna reduce the some of the issues. Also, to encourage people to reach out to the Mayor's Action Center if they feel they're having a speeding problem in their area. We can send cruisers to those areas to do enforcement.
Good work, thank you. Any other questions?
Have we considered photo enforcement?
Not formally.
Okay. Is that something that we could possibly look into? Like to slow things down until we're able to get everything else in place that Director Zamp is proposing?
Yeah, I think it would.
It's like a temporary measure at least.
I would be open to have further conversation with the administrator and directors as we move forward.
I know there's some legal,
Yeah, that's why I was
Issues around
asking.
that.
Yeah,
so we'd have to talk to the law department, obviously.
yeah, that's why I was asking about that part. Okay.
Mr. Chair, another question. Are we still collecting cellular data that I think we were using previously to find out where we had heavy traffic and where we had speeding?
Yeah, so we still are using the Urban SDK software, which is financed through Public Works. They just did a pretty big update on that. It was sort of less usable the last couple months. The last few months as they were doing a big push to kind of update a lot of how their stuff works. So it's going to be a lot more user friendly for us to look at it. But yeah, we still have that software. It's still collecting that data. And it's not using cell phone data, just for clarification. It's using the onboard GPS data from vehicles. And then it's what the software does is it aggregates that data and creates different data sets on the street center lines. It's not using cell phone data though.
Is it collecting GPS data from everyone, or do you have to
Cars.
opt it into your manufacturers?
Yeah, so it's going to be from the car manufacturers themselves. So obviously not every car is equipped with that. We know that is one problem. And yes, users can opt out of it. But what the Urban SDK has shown through some of their research is even if their collection rate is about 30 or 40% of vehicles, that comes down to being like, I can't remember their exact percentage, but it's like 98% accurate of what is actually seen on the road. So even though it's not collecting every car, it's a pretty darn good sense of what's actually happening on that street.
Okay. Then I noticed the speed table that was on South Taylor Road. Has that been removed?
I think they were doing some construction there, and I don't know what Public Works plan is to put it back or not. That and the one on Harcourt were being used from NOACA's street supplies program. So they haven't asked for them back yet, as far as I know. So I hope that we can have something back out on the ground. If not, for that, we know the recommendations from the South Taylor Fairmount study recommends keeping a speed table in place or a speed table in place at that location.
Have we done any estimates to find out what it would cost for the city to purchase some of those?
Yeah, we've had some numbers at some point. I know I've talked to Colette, and I imagine when we get to this demonstration portion, where we're having to purchase some of these, that's gonna come up. I don't know if the price has increased in the last couple of years.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? We need to move on to our finance. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna adjourn this meeting